People call you a narcissist the moment you stop being their emotional servant. But let me tell you, child, loving yourself isn't arrogance, it's awakening. The world will label your healing as ego, your confidence as pride, your peace as distance. But listen closely, sometimes protecting your soul looks selfish to those who used to benefit from your self-neglect. When you become a narcissist in their eyes, what they truly mean is, you stopped allowing your boundaries to be broken. You stopped saying yes when your spirit was screaming no. You stopped apologizing for existing too loudly, loving too deeply, dreaming too boldly. They call it pride, but it's not. It's peace. They call it ego, but it's not. It's awareness. See, darling, the ones who once fed on your weakness will always fear your strength. They'll whisper that you've changed. But the truth is, you woke up. And the day you wake up, you no longer chase validation. You create your own value. That's not narcissism, that's rebirth. They told you that self-love was selfishness. That looking in the mirror and smiling at the reflection was vanity. That saying no to what drains you was arrogance. But let me whisper a truth that will echo inside your spirit. Self-love is not selfishness, it is survival. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. You cannot light someone else's path if your flame has already gone out. Every morning, when you rise from your bed, you have a choice to either continue carrying everyone's expectations or to honor your own existence. Self-love begins in those quiet moments when you decide, I deserve peace today. It is not about luxury, it is about sanity. It is choosing to eat when you're hungry, rest when you're tired, and speak when silence is suffocating your truth. The world might call that selfishness because it benefits when you forget yourself. But darling, remember this, when you give yourself the love you always begged from others, that is not ego, that is healing. Think about the woman who says yes to every request. She takes care of everyone, her family, her friends, her workplace, but at night she collapses into her bed, her soul empty, her smile forced. One day she says, no, I can't make it today, I need time for myself. Suddenly she becomes the villain in everyone's story. They call her distant, proud, ungrateful, but all she did was remember her own name. That's how society twists love. It glorifies sacrifice, but it fears self-respect. Yet the truth remains, if she doesn't love herself, she will become a ghost living in a body that everyone uses but no one values. Look around. Have you noticed how easily people celebrate exhaustion but shame peace? How often they say, you're always busy helping everyone, you're such a good person, but when you finally sit still, they ask, why are you being lazy? The world will not teach you how to rest, it will teach you how to run until your knees break. Self-love is standing still in that storm and saying, I'm not running anymore. Think of a flower constantly giving its fragrance to the world. People walk by, admire it, and leave. But if the flower stops receiving sunlight or water, it dies, no matter how generous it was. You are that flower. The sunlight is your self-love. Without it, you cannot bloom. You can decorate everyone's garden, but your own roots will rot in the dark. So when you water your soul, when you protect your peace, when you say, today I choose me, it is not selfishness, it is photosynthesis for your spirit. In love too, this truth screams quietly. A person gives their all, texting, calling, waiting, apologizing for things they didn't do, hoping to keep someone who was never theirs to begin with. But love without self-love is a slow erosion. You start disappearing in the name of understanding. You shrink your needs to keep them comfortable. Then one day, you wake up and realize you are a stranger to yourself. That's the cost of forgetting your worth. Real love doesn't require you to abandon your soul to prove your loyalty. You don't have to bleed to be loved. If someone walks away because you chose peace over pain, thank them silently. They were not your destiny, they were your lesson. And even in friendships, you will see this pattern. You'll notice how some people love the version of you that says yes, that listens endlessly, that fixes their chaos. But when you start protecting your time, when you stop being the emergency contact for other people's drama, they call you cold, they forget that you were always there until you had to be there for yourself. That moment right there is self-love. Not the pretty kind that fits into quotes, but the gritty kind that requires courage. The kind that demands you to disappoint others just to stay true to your soul. In work, self-love might look like refusing to overwork for a company that forgets your name the moment you fall sick. It might look like saying, I deserve better when you're underpaid and overused. It might look like walking away from the comfort of familiarity to pursue something that scares you but excites you. People will call it risk, arrogance, madness, but it is simply you reclaiming your life from the grip of fear, because self-love doesn't just mean taking bubble baths and reading affirmations. It means making hard choices that honor your value. Even in families, sometimes self-love means distance. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much. It means refusing to shrink to fit old roles that no longer serve you. It means saying, I love you, but I need space. People may not understand that kind of courage. It threatens the pattern they are used to. But the truth is, when you choose yourself, you give others permission to do the same. Self-love is the art of returning home to yourself after years of being lost in others. It's the decision to stop begging for crumbs when you can bake your own bread. It's telling yourself, I'm not difficult, I'm just done settling. It's standing in front of a mirror and saying, I belong here, I am enough here. The world might not clap for you when you do this, but your soul will. You were never born to be the background of other people's stories. You were born to write your own chapter in your own ink, on your own terms. The most dangerous thing you can do is to start loving yourself in a world that profits from your self-doubt. They will call you selfish, dramatic, proud, but that's because they cannot control what they can no longer confuse. So when someone says, you've changed, smile gently and know that what they really mean is, you've stopped letting me take advantage of your kindness. That's not narcissism, that's self-respect dressed in wisdom. You owe no apology for finally learning how to love the person who has been with you through every heartbreak, every disappointment, every storm. You. They will call you arrogant the day you stop allowing them to walk over your peace. They will whisper that you've become too full of yourself the moment you decide to no longer be their emotional trash can. But the truth, my dear, is that boundaries are not arrogance. They are self-respect in motion. They are the invisible fences that protect your mental garden from the weeds of manipulation, guilt, and emotional exhaustion. You see, people love your kindness until it stops benefiting them. The moment your yes turns into a calm and firm no, their tone changes. But don't you ever let their discomfort convince you that your boundaries are wrong. A boundary doesn't mean you love less. It means you finally learned how to love yourself too. Imagine a woman who answers every late night call from a friend, who only remembers her when life falls apart. She listens for hours, gives advice, offers comfort. But the day she says, I can't talk right now, I need rest, she suddenly becomes cold, distant, and uncaring in that friend's story. That's the illusion the world creates. It glorifies self-sacrifice and punishes self-preservation. But that woman isn't arrogant. She's evolving. She's realizing her peace is not a public playground. Boundaries are not built from pride. They are built from pain. From all those moments you gave too much, said too little, and were left empty. It's like a person locking the door, not out of hate for the world, but out of love for their home. You don't close your door to imprison yourself. You close it to protect what's sacred inside. And you, my dear, are sacred ground. Take the example of someone in a relationship where love became one-sided. Every time they express a need, they're told they're too sensitive or too demanding. But boundaries are the language of love. They say, this is how I deserve to be treated. When one person keeps crossing those lines and you finally say, no, this doesn't feel right, they'll call you difficult. But that difficulty is the birth of dignity. True love never demands you to silence your boundaries to prove your devotion. Even at work, boundaries matter. Picture an employee who always stays late, covers shifts, and takes on tasks that aren't theirs. Everyone praises their dedication, but no one respects their limits. The day they finally say, I can't stay after hours today, the praise turns into gossip. They've changed, they'll say. But what truly changed was the realization that loyalty without limits leads to burnout. That silence is not professionalism, it's quiet suffering. Setting boundaries at work doesn't mean you're lazy. It means you are wise enough to know your worth is not measured by exhaustion. And what about family? Sometimes you'll have to set boundaries with the very people who raised you. It might sound like, I love you, but I can't have this conversation right now. Or I respect you, but my choices are mine. It hurts because love teaches us obedience, but healing teaches us boundaries. When you begin to express what hurts you, some will say you've become disrespectful. But understand this, respect is not one-sided. Boundaries are bridges that connect healthy relationships, not walls that divide them. Friendships too are tested by boundaries. There are people who will drain you with endless negativity, yet disappear when you need a shoulder. The day you say, I can't be your therapist anymore, I'm trying to heal myself, you'll feel guilty. That guilt isn't because you're wrong. It's because you've been conditioned to believe that love means overextending yourself. But love that costs your peace is too expensive. Boundaries don't break friendships, they reveal which ones were real. Think of your mind as a house. Every thought, every emotion, every piece of your peace lives inside it. Boundaries are the doors and locks that protect that house. Not everyone deserves access to your living room, let alone your bedroom of secrets. Some people only visit to rearrange your furniture, to make your home uncomfortable for you. When you start closing doors, they'll knock louder, shout harder, maybe even try to guilt you into letting them back in. But remember, peace doesn't have to explain itself. You don't owe anyone entry to your sanity, and sometimes the hardest boundaries are with yourself. Yes, even you. The boundary that says, I won't talk down to myself today, or I won't let my past control my present. Self-discipline is the highest form of self-love. It's the boundary between who you were and who you're becoming. It's saying, I will no longer chase people or places that make me forget my worth. There's a quiet power that comes when you start protecting your energy. You no longer react to everything, you observe. You no longer argue to prove your heart, you walk away to preserve it. Boundaries are that silence that confuses those who used to feed on your reactions. They'll poke, they'll provoke, and when you don't respond, they'll call you arrogant. But arrogance is thinking you're above others. Boundaries are knowing you're above mistreatment. And oh, how the world will try to shame you. They'll say you've changed. But you'll smile because you finally understand. Growth looks like selfishness to those who still expect your old version to serve them. You were never meant to be everyone's comfort zone. You were meant to be your own home, so keep your boundaries like precious jewels. Not everyone deserves to touch them. Protect your time, your energy, your heart. Don't justify your limits to people who benefited from your lack of them. You can be kind and still say no. You can be humble and still demand respect. You can be loving and still choose distance. Boundaries don't make you arrogant, they make you free. There comes a moment in life when you realize that silence is not weakness, it is strength disguised as stillness. The world teaches you to speak, to argue, to shout so you can be heard, but true power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply breathes. Silence is not about being voiceless. It's about knowing when your voice no longer deserves the noise of misunderstanding. It's a language the wise understand and the insecure fear, because silence makes people face themselves, and that's something most souls are not ready to do. Think of a time when you were misunderstood. You tried to explain yourself, justify your actions, prove your intention, but the more you spoke, the less they listened. That's when you learned that peace is not found in endless explanations. It's found in the quiet acceptance that not everyone deserves your words. There's power in simply walking away, in letting your absence say what your mouth no longer needs to, because silence, my dear, is the loudest declaration of self-respect. In arguments, silence is not surrender, it is awareness. When two people scream, the truth gets buried beneath the volume. But when one goes quiet, the noise reveals itself for what it is: desperation. Silence in an argument is not losing, it is understanding that peace is more precious than being right. You can waste hours trying to convince someone blind to your truth, or you can save your soul and walk away quietly, letting time be your advocate. Sometimes your calm composure will disturb them more than your anger ever could, because silence exposes what shouting hides. It shows who truly has control. In relationships, silence speaks when love has been taken for granted. There's a difference between ignoring someone and withdrawing your energy from where it's unappreciated. When someone mistreats you, they expect you to react, to beg, to chase. But when you choose silence, you disrupt their pattern. You break the cycle. That silence will echo louder than any words ever could. They'll remember the way you used to text first, call first, fix everything. And now the quiet will haunt them. Silence becomes your dignity, walking out of their chaos. Imagine a woman who was always accused of being too emotional. Every time she cried, they mocked her. Every time she spoke up, they silenced her. One day she stopped explaining, stopped reacting. She just smiled and grew distant. That silence terrified them, because the woman they once controlled with words had now mastered the power of none. Her silence became her sword, sharp, poised, and touchable. The moment she learned that not every battle deserves a response, she stopped losing sleep over proving her worth. Even in friendships, silence carries weight. There will be people who gossip, who twist your kindness, who test your patience. The temptation to confront them, to clear your name, will burn inside you. But sometimes silence is the most devastating truth, because gossip dies in the absence of participation. When you no longer feed the lies, they starve. When you no longer explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, you reclaim your peace. Silence is the armor that keeps your spirit from bleeding for those who thrive on chaos. In success, silence is discipline. The world will tell you to announce every move, every dream, every plan, but the most powerful growth happens in private. Flowers don't make noise when they bloom. They simply unfold in their own rhythm, under the quiet sun. Let your success speak for itself. The loudest room is often the most insecure. The real ones work in silence and let the results make the noise. When you move silently, you protect your dreams from the envy of those who cannot imagine your light. In pain, silence can be healing. Not every heartbreak deserves an audience. Sometimes you don't need to post it, tell it, or explain it. You just need to sit with it. Let your tears fall in private. Let your heart break quietly so it can rebuild itself stronger. Pain changes shape when you stop feeding it with noise. When you sit in silence long enough, the pain that once broke you begins to teach you. You learn that peace is not found in distraction. It's found in the quiet acceptance that everything passes, even the ache. Even in success and rejection, silence has its place. When someone doubts you, don't argue. Don't try to convince them. Let your silence become your promise. Let your results become your revenge. People expect you to defend yourself, to fight, to explain, to seek approval. But when you go quiet and focus inward, you redirect your power. You begin to understand that validation is the reward of the insecure, but silence is the crown of the wise. You no longer waste energy proving, you start building. And when the fruits of your labor bloom, the same people who questioned you will sit in silence of their own. There's also the silence that exists between chaos and calm. Those moments when life is falling apart and you don't know what to say, what to do, or who to trust. That silence isn't emptiness, it's alignment. It's the universe recalibrating you. The storms outside are loud, but the eye of the storm, the center, is silent. That's where power lives. The stillness inside you during the hardest times is not numbness, it's sacred space. It's where you hear your soul whisper, you'll make it. And sometimes, silence is the final boundary. You've said enough, you've done enough, you've tried enough. There's nothing left to prove. Silence in those moments becomes your closure, not because you stopped caring, but because you care too deeply about your own peace to keep speaking where your truth is not valued. Silence doesn't mean giving up, it means growing up. It means knowing your voice has power, but choosing to use it wisely. So when they wonder why you no longer react, why you no longer respond, why your calm seems louder than their noise, understand this. They can't hear you, but they can feel you. Because silence doesn't shout, it vibrates. It's not about retreating from the world, it's about reclaiming yourself within it. And once you've mastered silence, no one's chaos can ever shake your peace again. Healing doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you speak, how you respond, how you show up in the world. When you begin to heal, your language transforms from survival to serenity. You no longer speak to defend your pain, you speak to protect your peace. The words that once came from your wounds now flow from your wisdom. Healing changes your tone, your timing, your truth. It's not that you stop caring, it's that you stop bleeding through your words. Once you might have said, I'm fine, when your world was breaking. You wore strength like a costume, hoping no one would notice the cracks in your voice. But healing teaches you that pretending is not strength. It's silence in disguise. Now, when someone asks how you are, you might pause, breathe, and say, I'm still growing, but I'm okay. That's the voice of healing, honest, grounded, gentle. You no longer speak to hide, you speak to honor your truth. Healing changes how you talk to yourself. There was a time when your inner voice was your own worst enemy. I'm not enough. I always mess up. Nobody cares. Those words were your prison. You repeated them until you believed them, but healing teaches you to rewrite your internal script. Now your inner voice becomes your guardian. I am learning, I am worthy, I am allowed to rest. You stop attacking yourself with the language of self-doubt and start nurturing yourself with the language of love, because the most powerful conversations you'll ever have are the ones you have in silence, with your own soul, in relationships. Healing changes your vocabulary completely. Before, you might have said, I can't live without you. Now you say, I love you, but I can live with myself too. You stop using desperation as a dialect. You no longer beg for attention. You no longer plead to be seen. You start using softer, wiser words. I understand, I need space, I deserve better. That's the sound of growth, the music of boundaries. When you heal, your communication becomes cleaner, not colder. You no longer speak to keep people, you speak to keep your peace. Think about the way you respond to conflict. Before healing, every argument felt like war. You needed to have the last word to prove your point, to protect your ego. But healing changes that instinct. Now you can listen without defending, walk away without bitterness, and forgive without announcement. You realize that peace is not found in winning, it's found in understanding. Healing teaches your tongue patience. You don't rush to react, you pause to reflect. That pause is where power lives. Imagine a woman who used to explain herself endlessly. Every time someone doubted her, she'd write paragraphs trying to prove her intention. When someone hurt her, she'd argue, cry, and plead. But now, after healing, she smiles gently and says, I don't owe anyone an explanation for my peace. Her silence, her composure, her choice of words, all changed by healing. She no longer needs to be understood by everyone. She only needs to be understood by herself. That shift is liberation in its purest form. Healing even changes how you talk about others. Once gossip may have been your comfort, a way to release pain through judgment, but now healed people don't gossip, they bless. You begin to realize that everyone is fighting a battle you cannot see. So instead of saying, she's so fake, you say, she must be hurting. Instead of saying, he doesn't deserve happiness, you say, I hope he finds peace. That's not weakness, that's evolution. Healing makes your words softer but stronger. You start speaking from compassion, not comparison. Even in pain, healing changes your dialogue. Before, when something hurt, your language was filled with despair. Why me? Life is unfair, I can't take this anymore. But as you heal, your words become wiser. You start saying, what is this teaching me? How can I grow from this? Pain no longer defines your story, it refines it. Healing replaces victimhood with victory, and your words reflect that transformation. You realize that what you say shapes what you see. So you speak with intention, not reaction. Healing changes how you speak to the world. You no longer chase validation with your words. You stop explaining your dreams to people who lack vision. You stop begging to be understood in rooms that were never built for your soul. Instead, you start speaking with quiet certainty. I know who I am. I know where I'm going. You don't need applause. You need alignment. And that shift in your language confuses people who still crave noise. There's a calmness that comes when healing takes root. You don't rush your words. You let them flow like water, gentle, clear, cleansing. You become careful with what you say because you've learned the cost of careless speech. You stop using words as weapons and start using them as wings. You understand that energy is exchanged through language, and not every thought deserves to become sound. Sometimes healing means learning that silence is a sentence too, and it often speaks louder than words ever could. In family, healing may sound like, I love you, but I need distance right now. It's not rebellion, it's recognition. You no longer speak from guilt, you speak from growth. When you heal, you realize that love without boundaries becomes bondage. You begin to use language that sets you free instead of language that keeps you trapped in cycles of pleasing and pretending. At work, healing changes your tone from desperate to decisive. You stop saying, I'll do whatever you need, and start saying, that's outside my limit. You begin to speak from confidence, not fear. Because healing teaches you that your voice holds value. You learn that speaking softly doesn't mean speaking small. It means speaking from strength, not survival. Even your laughter changes when you heal. It becomes real again, not a mask to hide sadness. Your I'm okay becomes authentic, not an escape. The phrases that once carried pain now carry power. Healing rewires your vocabulary to match your new vibration. You start using words that lift, not drain, that inspire, not impress. Healing doesn't make you silent, it makes you selective. You no longer waste your voice on battles beneath your peace. You speak when it serves purpose, not when it seeks approval. And in that discipline, your language becomes a reflection of your freedom. You begin to speak less from pain and more from peace, less from fear and more from faith. Because when healing touches your soul, your words stop cutting others and start cultivating yourself. Confidence is a strange thing. The moment you find it, the world reacts as if your strength is an earthquake shaking the comfort of those who once controlled you. Confidence threatens control because it breaks the chains people secretly hope you'd never notice. It rewrites the story they tried to write for you. Some people don't fear your silence, your distance, or even your success. What they truly fear is you waking up to your own power, because once you do, they can no longer manipulate you, guilt you, or use your fears against you. Confidence is not loud. It is not arrogance. It is clarity. And clarity terrifies those who depended on your confusion. When you finally stand tall, people who once towered over your insecurities begin to shrink, not because you've grown too big, but because they were never as powerful as you thought. Confidence simply reveals the truth without argument, without apology. Think about a time someone made you feel small. They convinced you that your dreams were unrealistic, your voice too loud, your presence too much. You believed them because you doubted yourself. But the moment you gained confidence, really gained it, they panicked. Suddenly, the same people who told you you can't began saying, you've changed. They weren't afraid of change. They were afraid of losing control over you. That moment is when you realize that confidence was the freedom you always deserved. In relationships, confidence becomes a mirror that exposes intentions. A partner who once controlled you with jealousy, emotional manipulation, or guilt will feel their power slip the moment you begin saying, I deserve better. Confidence makes you stop begging for love and start choosing it. It shifts the balance. Before they decided how much you were worth, now you do. Before they controlled the narrative, now you choose the ending. And nothing terrifies an insecure person more than a partner who no longer fears being alone. Picture a woman who once accepted breadcrumbs of affection because she feared losing someone. She stayed quiet just to keep peace, tolerated disrespect just to avoid abandonment. But then she healed, learned her worth, and found her confidence. Now she speaks clearly, stands firmly, and refuses to settle. The man who once controlled her is shocked. Not because she became aggressive, but because she became aware. Confidence doesn't make you harder, it makes you unshakable. And people who benefited from your weakness will always call your strength selfish. Even in friendships, confidence exposes dynamics. Those who used you for emotional labor, who only called when they needed help, who kept you around because your insecurity made you convenient, those people will feel threatened when you begin valuing your time. When you start saying, I can't today, or I'm focusing on myself, they'll call you distant. But that distance isn't arrogance, it's liberation. Confidence helps you realize that loyalty without boundaries becomes self-destruction. And when you stop shrinking to fit their comfort, you stop being controlled by their expectations. At work, confidence is the most dangerous weapon you'll ever carry. Not because it hurts others, but because it frees you. Think of the employee who always accepted extra tasks, who never asked for a raise, who feared losing their job. People praised their humility, but deep down it was fear disguised as obedience. Then one day that same employee learns to say, my time has value, that's not part of my role, or I deserve fair compensation. Suddenly, those who depended on their silence feel threatened, because confidence doesn't just raise your voice, it raises your standards. And when your standards rise, their control falls. Confidence also threatens control in families, where you are expected to play a role that no longer fits the person you're becoming. A child who grows up being told to obey, to stay quiet, to suppress their identity becomes a threat when they begin expressing their truth. A confident voice in a household built on fear is revolutionary. It shifts the energy, it breaks cycles. When you say, I don't want to live like this, or my decisions are mine, it scares them. Not because you're wrong, but because they can no longer shape your future with their past. Family sometimes wants your success, but not your independence. Confidence forces them to confront that there will also be people in your life who loved you as long as you doubted yourself. They relied on your insecurity like oxygen, because an insecure you was predictable, manageable, controllable. But a confident you, that person becomes unpredictable. You start making decisions based on clarity instead of fear, on purpose instead of approval. You walk differently, speak differently, live differently. Confidence shifts your energy so dramatically that some people will distance themselves, not because you push them away, but because they can no longer pull your strings. Confidence also changes your relationship with fear. Before, fear controlled your choices. You stayed in places you outgrew because you feared judgment. You tolerated disrespect because you feared loneliness. You stayed quiet because you feared confrontation. But confidence flips the script. You stop fearing what people will say and start fearing what will happen if you don't honor your soul. You stop asking, what if they leave? And start asking, what if I leave myself by staying? That shift terrifies people who once used your fear to keep you small. Confidence creates an inner revolution. It makes you reclaim your voice from those who tried to silence it. It makes you reclaim your decisions from those who tried to dictate them. It makes you reclaim your peace from those who polluted it. And in that reclamation, you become untouchable. Not loud, not aggressive, not superior, just untouchable. Because confidence is not about dominating others. It's about dominating your own doubts. Confidence threatens control because it removes the handles people used to grab whenever they wanted to steer your life. Your guilt, your insecurity, your fear, your need for approval. Those were the handles. Confidence breaks them off one by one. And when there's nothing left for people to hold on to, they realize they can no longer move you. You become still, centered, grounded in yourself. And a person who cannot be controlled becomes a person who cannot be defeated. They will call you cold the moment you stop being convenient. They will whisper that you've changed the minute you stop tolerating what wounds you, but don't let their words confuse you. Your heart has not turned cold, it has simply become clear. Clarity is not cruelty, clarity is not distance. Clarity is knowing exactly what you deserve and refusing anything that asks you to shrink. Some people can only love you when you are confused, lost, or unsure of yourself. The moment you see yourself clearly, you stop participating in your own mistreatment. That's not coldness, that's evolution. There was a time when you overgave, over-explained, over-apologized. You let people take pieces of you because you believed that love meant sacrifice and kindness meant silence. But healing changes your lens. You start seeing situations not for what you wish they were, but for what they truly are. And when you see clearly, your reactions change. The same behaviors you once tolerated now feel heavy. The disrespect you excused now feels toxic. The relationships you clung to now look one-sided. The friendships you defended now look draining, and suddenly you're not willing to bleed for people who wouldn't even offer a bandage. That's not coldness, that's clarity. Imagine a woman who once stayed in conversations long after they stopped serving her. She answered late-night messages from people who only thought of her when they needed comfort. She explained herself to those committed to misunderstanding her. She tolerated jokes that cut her heart because she thought, it's okay, they didn't mean it. But then one day, she wakes up with a quiet strength inside her. She doesn't argue anymore, she doesn't justify anymore, she simply walks away, and suddenly the world says, she's so cold now. But they don't understand that she's not cold. She's clear about who deserves access to her warmth. Clarity makes you choose silence over chaos. It makes you choose distance over forced closeness. It makes you choose peace over pleasing. When you choose peace, people who once relied on your confusion feel threatened. They were comfortable when you doubted yourself. They had power when you cared too much. But now you've become careful, mindful, intentional. You respond with thought instead of emotion. You leave messages unseen when the energy feels wrong. You walk away without slamming doors. That calmness scares people more than anger ever could. But calmness isn't coldness. It's the clarity that chaos no longer deserves your presence. In relationships, being clear changes everything. You no longer chase people who run. You don't beg someone to stay. You don't force conversations with someone who keeps you waiting. You stop complaining about the same hurt again and again. You stop romanticizing bare minimum affection. You stop twisting yourself into shapes just to fit into someone else's life. Instead, you say things like, if it doesn't grow me, I won't water it, and if I feel anxious around you more than I feel protected, this is not love. Those sentences aren't cold. They're clear. They come from knowing the difference between longing and settling. In friendships, your clarity will confuse people because you used to be the one who listened for hours, even when your heart was heavy. You were the one who said yes every time they asked for help, the one who showed up even when they didn't. But now, when you say, I'm busy, or I'm resting, or I can't be there today, they call you distant. What they don't see is that you're finally giving yourself the attention you always gave to them. You are not cold. You are just tired of carrying one-sided connections. Clarity means you can love someone deeply and still walk away from what drains your soul. Even in family, clarity shifts your role. You stop saying okay out of fear of conflict. You stop allowing guilt to dictate your decisions. You stop repeating patterns that broke you. You begin to say things like, I need space, or that doesn't align with my life, or I'm not okay with this anymore. They say you've become difficult, but clear people are often labeled difficult by those who benefited from their silence. You are simply protecting yourself from emotional responsibilities that were never yours to carry. At work, clarity looks like saying, I can't take on extra tasks today, or I deserve fair compensation, or that tone is not acceptable. Those sentences make people uncomfortable because they were used to your compliance. They mistook your kindness for fear, but now you speak with confidence, and confidence sounds like coldness to those who expected your obedience. You're not cold. You're clear about your value. Clarity also changes how you react to negativity. Before, you might have argued, defended, or fought to prove your innocence. But now, when someone lies about you, you don't correct them. When someone misjudges you, you don't chase them. When someone treats you poorly, you don't try to earn their kindness. You simply step back. Because healed clarity whispers, you don't need to convince anyone who is committed to misunderstanding you. That distance is not cold. It's the clarity of a soul that refuses to exhaust itself for the ungrateful. Clarity also changes how you love. You love softer, gentler, but smarter. You no longer love blindly. You no longer give unlimited chances. You no longer confuse attachment with connection. You make choices not from fear, but from wisdom. You stop trying to hold on to what hurts you. Stop trying to fix what breaks you. You stop trying to change people who refuse to change themselves. You love with open eyes, not open wounds. That maturity looks like coldness to people who aren't ready to meet you at your depth. What people call cold is often just a soul that finally learned to prioritize itself. They don't see the years you spent being warm to those who left you shivering. They don't see the nights you cried because you couldn't understand why people treated you so carelessly. They don't see the versions of yourself you lost in trying to keep others comfortable. They don't see the battles you fought to reclaim your heart. All they see now is the clarity that protects you. You're not cold. You're clear about who you are, clear about what you deserve, clear about what you refuse to allow, clear about where your energy goes, clear about what peace means to you. And when clarity arrives, confusion exits. And people who thrived in your confusion will call your clarity cruelty. But do not be mistaken. Your heart is not frozen. It is focused. You simply learned that your warmth is a gift, and not everyone has earned the right to feel it. Growth has a strange appearance. It rarely looks peaceful to the people watching you. In fact, when you start growing, it almost always looks like rebellion. It looks like defiance. It looks like distance. But what they don't understand is that the rebellion is not against them. It's against the old version of you. Growth demands that you break patterns, question habits, and outgrow identities that once felt comfortable. And to those who benefited from your old self, your evolution will always feel like betrayal. But it's not betrayal, it's becoming. There was a time when you lived on autopilot. You said yes when you meant no. You stayed silent to avoid conflict. You apologized for simply existing. You accepted mistreatment because you didn't know what respect felt like. And then one day something inside you whispered, enough. That whisper was your awakening. That whisper was the beginning of a new life. But the moment you start listening to that quiet voice inside, the world begins to react. The same people who encouraged your weakness suddenly resent your strength. They start calling you changed, difficult, ungrateful, but you're not any of those. You're simply growing, and growth requires breaking the scripts that kept you small. Imagine a woman who has always been the peacekeeper in her family. She kept quiet even when she was hurting. She sacrificed her dreams to keep everyone comfortable. She lived in the shadow of expectations. But then something shifts. She starts setting boundaries. She starts saying, I can't do that anymore, or this doesn't feel right for me. Suddenly the family says she's rebellious, dramatic, disrespectful. But look deeper. She is not rebelling against her family. She is rebelling against the role she was forced to play. Growth isn't disrespectful. It's self-respect reclaiming itself. Or think of the student who always followed the path their parents wanted, studied what they said, lived how they said, chose dreams that weren't theirs. But then they decide to chase their true passion. They stop caring about approval and start caring about alignment. The world calls it rebellion, but in truth, it's courage. Growth requires leaving behind expectations that were never yours to carry. And often the people who shout the loudest against your evolution are the ones who hoped your potential would stay asleep. In friendships, Growth will expose dynamics you once overlooked. You start noticing the jokes that were always at your expense. You start seeing how much you gave compared to what you received. You begin to understand that your presence was valued only when you were convenient. So you step back, you distance yourself, you stop answering calls that drain you, and suddenly they say, "You've changed." But isn't that the point? Growth makes you rebel against friendships that only flourish when you are small. Growth teaches you that sometimes you don't lose friends, you lose illusions. In relationships, growth looks like rebellion when you stop tolerating emotional neglect, you stop begging for love, you stop accepting excuses, you start demanding consistency, honesty, effort to the one who benefited from your insecurity. This becomes a threat. They say, "You're not the person I fell in love with," but what they're really saying is, "I miss the version of you who settled for less." Growth makes you rebel against the love that hurts more than it heals. You begin to see that love should not cage you, it should elevate you, and any love that asks you to shrink is not love, it is control disguised as affection. Even in your personal habits, growth feels like rebellion. When you start waking up early, eating better, exercising, reading, or working on your dreams, people who once mocked your ambitions suddenly become uncomfortable. They say, "You're obsessed," or "You're acting too serious." But that's because your growth reflects their stagnation. Your improvement reminds them of their excuses. So instead of celebrating your progress, they call it rebellion. But truly, you are not rebelling. You are becoming the version of yourself you always needed. Growth also means letting go, and letting go always looks rebellious to those who wanted you to stay stuck. You let go of the job that suffocated your soul. You let go of the relationship that drained your spirit. You let go of the friendships built on convenience. You let go of the habits that numbed your potential. You let go of the trauma-induced versions of yourself that no longer serve your future. And every time you let go, people will try to guilt you back into the same cage you escaped. They'll say you've become distant, selfish, or insensitive. But letting go is not rebellion, it is renewal. Think about the workplace where you were once quiet, overworked, and afraid to speak. You stayed extra hours, took on extra responsibilities, and swallowed disrespect, and one day you start saying, "That task is not mine," or "I deserve better," or "I will not accept this tone." Suddenly your boss, your coworkers, the whole environment reacts. They accuse you of changing your attitude, but that attitude is your freedom. Growth teaches you to rebel against exploitation disguised as professionalism. Growth even looks like rebellion when you start healing, when you stop complaining, start journaling, start praying, meditating, reading, investing in yourself, building your inner world. People who fed on your chaos become uncomfortable. When your reactions change, when your silence becomes stronger than your anger, when your peace becomes your priority, they say you're becoming cold, boring, too spiritual, but healing is the ultimate rebellion against the trauma that tried to shape you. Growth will always look like rebellion to the ones who benefited from your lack of it. They want you predictable, manageable, familiar, but the moment you step into your truth, you become unpredictable. You become a storm of clarity. You become a wildfire of boundaries. You become a sunrise of potential, and that transformation threatens anyone who hoped you'd remain in the dark. Growth is rebellion against the old you, the insecure you, the afraid you, the silent you, the people-pleasing you, the version of you that forgot its worth. And every time you grow, you break another chain. Every time you evolve, you walk another step away from the cage they tried to keep you in. Growth is not rebellion. It only looks like rebellion to those who never expected you to rise. You've walked through fire, and yet here you stand, not broken, not bitter, but reborn. And now, as we reach the end of this journey, hear these words not just with your ears, but with your spirit. Your life is not happening to you. It is happening for you. Everything you lost cleared the space for everything you're becoming. Everything that left was making room for everything aligned with your destiny. And every person who misunderstood your healing, your boundaries, your silence, your confidence, your growth was simply not meant to walk with this newer, stronger you. You are not who you were a year ago. You are not who you were yesterday. You are rising, and rising always scares the ones who were comfortable with your low altitude. But listen closely. Your life is not meant to be lived on mute just because others fear the volume of your truth. You were not sent here to dim your light just because it blinds the eyes of those committed to darkness. You were not born to shrink. You were born to expand. There comes a moment in every warrior's life when they must decide, remain loyal to the old wounds or become loyal to the future calling your name. And today, right now, in this very breath, you choose growth. Even when growth requires letting go. You choose healing. Even when healing requires breaking. You choose peace. Even when peace requires distance. And you choose clarity. Even when clarity requires walking away from everything that blurred your soul. You are not cold. You are clear. You are not arrogant. You are aware. You are not selfish. You are finally saving the only person who has carried you through every storm. Yourself. Hear this truth and let it anchor itself into your bones. And you will outgrow people who are still committed to misunderstanding you. You will outgrow places that demanded your silence. You will outgrow versions of yourself that were created in survival. And when that happens, don't apologize, don't shrink, don't explain. Transformation is never comfortable to those who benefit from your stagnation. Let them say you changed because you did. Let them say you're different because you are. Let them say you're distant because you've learned to protect your peace. You owe nobody the version of you that had to suffer to make them comfortable. And now, understand this deeply. Your silence does not mean you're weak. It means you've mastered the art of choosing peace over chaos. Your confidence does not mean you're dangerous. It means you've reclaimed the power you once handed away. Your boundaries do not mean you're rude. They mean your soul has finally remembered its value. Your healing does not make you complicated. It makes you whole. Stand tall in your evolution. Stand proud in your becoming. The world may not clap for your growth, but your future will. The universe rearranges itself for those brave enough to choose themselves. And you, through every tear, every battle, every awakening, have proven that you are one of the brave ones. So step into the next chapter of your life with your head held high and your heart unashamed. Walk like someone who has survived their own storms. Speak like someone who has met their own worth. Rise like someone who knows they were never meant to live small, because the truth is simple and unstoppable. You are not their version of you anymore. You are your own creation, and you are becoming someone the older you would be proud of. Go forward with this fire in your soul and this truth in your spirit. Your power is not coming. Your power is not on its way. Your power is already here.